Lights, camera, action.
Today. Okay. I know I'm being bad all day. Stop it. All right, you guys ready? Okay. So first we're gonna do the flexor carpi radialis. Okay, on page 172, 173. I'm putting her over a bolster because I want her to be able to have a little bit of extension. So you can put her on whoever you're testing on this side of the table, but I prefer the bolster. All right, because you want to give them a little bit of slight extension. So if we're testing the flexor carpi radialis, then because she's starting with her palm up in supination and her wrist in a little bit of extension, we're testing this motion, right, and this motion. So we're testing wrist flexion and radial deviation at the same time, okay? So flexor carpi radialis, I would have her start and say, Emily, I'm gonna put you on this bolster, your palm up. I'm gonna put you in a little bit of extension. You can see that she's in a little bit of extension, okay? I want you to bring your palm up and towards the thumb side, okay? Good. Now I'm gonna stabilize at the forearm, like the distal forearm, to make sure she doesn't compensate, and this bolster also helps to not compensate, okay? So now I'm gonna push her back in the direction of extension and ulnar deviation, right? Because I'm doing the opposite of what she's doing. So I'm gonna say, Emily, I'm gonna put some resistance at your wrist, and I want you to hold your position, okay? Count of 3. 1, 2, 3. So I'm putting her back in ulnar deviation and extension. That's how I'm testing her flexor carpi radialis, okay? So if she's coming up in flexion and radial deviation, I'm gonna be pushing her back in extension and ulnar deviation, okay?
Extension.
Should we do that again?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm gonna have Emily, would you bring your palm up for me and also towards the thumb side? And I can either, I have bigger hands, right? So I'm used to cupping my thumb. The way that the book has it is using your whole fingers to do this. So you can do it either way, whatever way is more comfortable for you. But I would say, I'm gonna push you back down in, I want you to hold that position, okay? Count of 3. 1, 2, 3. So I'm pushing her back in ulnar deviation and extension, okay? Okay. So for the next one, we're doing the flexor carpi ulnaris, and we're kind of doing the reverse, okay? So I'm still gonna have her on the bolster, and I'm gonna have her slightly in extension. And then I'm gonna have her, if she's doing ulnaris, she's gonna do flexor, so wrist flexion, and also ulnar deviation, right? So that's what that's the motion that she needs to be having. So then I'm going to come on the opposite side, and I would probably move, but I'm sitting back here just so that you guys can see a little bit better. I'm gonna stabilize her at the distal forearm, okay? And I'm gonna move her into radial deviation and extension because she's doing flexion and ulnar deviation, so I'm gonna do the opposite. Doing ulnar deviation and extension, okay? So this is how I tell her. Emily.
That's radial deviation.
Am I doing radial? I'm sorry. Don't. You just said ulnar. Yeah, okay. Radial deviation. So I'm pushing her back into the opposite position. Flexor carpi ulnaris. So for flexor carpi ulnaris, she's going to be flexing and going towards ulnar deviation, and I'm going to be pushing her back into extension and radial deviation.
So opposite.
Opposite.
So the first one was flexor carpi
Radialis. Yes. Okay. So I'm going to stabilize the same place I stabilized for the flexor carpi radialis over at the distal forearm. Okay. And I'm going to have her raise her hand up and go towards her ulnar. So I'm going to say, Emily, will you bring your palm up for me and towards your little finger? Perfect. Now I'm going to push you back down. I want you to resist my pressure. Okay. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Good. So I'm going to push her back towards radial deviation and extension. We have to test both motions, okay, for that test. Okay. So then on page 176, you have the palmaris longus. And with the palmaris longus, you don't necessarily test that muscle, okay? So you're not going to be putting your hands on your partner, but you will say, just to see if they have it, I want you to say, can you bring your wrist up and cup your fingers? Okay? So you bring your wrist up a little bit in flexion and cup your fingers, and that palmaris longus should pop out. You see it? And then just palpate it. Okay? So like, oh, okay, good.
Everyone may not have it.
Yes.
Only
You may not have it.
8% of the population has this muscle.
Yeah.
So if we draw that, we just ask them to.
Ask them, could you bring your wrist up for me and just cup your fingers and then just kind of lightly touch over it? Good. And that's
They
it.
can do that from the bolster.
Yeah, you can do it from the bolster there. Yeah, yours is very prominent. I'm going to show. There's Emily's.
Does everyone have one?
So mine's very prominent too.
I don't have it.
So we
Well,
just.
there's
I can only see one of mine.
That's okay. All right.
I know. Yours is you can't see. It's not easy.
Yeah.
All right.
This is hard
next.
to see.
I don't think I have it. Nope.
You probably do.
Make a cup.
Yeah.
Cup your hand.
Flex forward and cup your hands a little bit, and you should see it jump up.
Yeah, you have it.
It's
Yeah.
just harder to see on
Just
yours.
harder to see. Okay. So the next one we have on page 178 is the extensor carpi radialis longus and the extensor carpi radialis brevis. We're going
Brevis.
to test those two together, okay? The extensor carpi radialis longus and the extensor carpi radialis brevis. We're going to test those together, page 177, 178. Okay, so if we're doing extensor, we're going to put her in slight pronation, more neutral position, okay? Just so that you guys can see it clear too.
Right.
And so I'm going to stabilize again at the distal forearm, and I want her to be able to do wrist extension and radial deviation. That's going to be for extensor carpi radialis longus and brevis. Extension and radial deviation.
Neutral position.
Okay? So neutral to prone. Like you want to make sure that she's not fully neutral because it's going to be a little bit harder. You're not going to have so much advantage to do that extension. It's going to work more in her favor. So we're going to just kind of more neutral, but you want to make sure that she's not going into supination. Keep her more prone. Okay? So I'm going to stabilize so she doesn't compensate. And I'm going to ask her to raise her wrist back for me and up into radial deviation. And then I'm going to push her back, down, right, into flexion and ulnar deviation. Okay? So if it's the same technique, but the opposite. Instead of doing the flexor, now we're doing extensor. So with her in slightly flexion, I'm going to have her raise her hand up into extension and radial deviation. So I'm going to tell her, can you lift your hand up and go towards your thumb side? Okay, and then I'm going to push her back down into flexion and towards her ulnar side. Okay, and that's how you would test both.
Is
She's
it like a
extended.
slightly curve or what? Because it seems to me it's the same thing, like up and down, not like.
I know, it's hard to see it because, okay, so if she didn't resist me, because if she was really resisting me, you probably wouldn't even see it move.
Okay,
Okay, so I'm going to tell her not to resist me. So I'll have her come up into that position of extension and radial deviation. So back and up, so it's like extension and radial deviation. And I'm going to push her back down into flexion and ulnar deviation. Okay? Making the bones move. All right. So think about what the muscle action is and what are we trying to test. Okay? So if we're testing the flexor, we're going to put her in extension, push her back down, right? And then vice versa. We do the backwards. Whatever she's doing, we're going to do the opposite of that to test it. Okay? And then our last one is the extensor carpi ulnaris. And this one, you can actually have her more in the prone position, okay? And then you're going to have her still with slight flexion, so off a surface, okay? And so if she's doing extensor carpi ulnaris, so she's going to want to bring her wrist into extension and ulnar deviation, right? So she's in slight flexion. I'm just pushing her off so that you guys can see. So slightly flexed, she's going to go into extension and ulnar deviation. Okay?
She's fully prone.
She's prone. Extension and ulnar deviation. That is our extensor carpi ulnaris. So then I'm going to stabilize again at the distal forearm. Okay? And I'm going to ask her to raise her hand up and then towards your little finger. Good. Now I'm going to push you back down and towards your thumb. So I want you to hold your position, okay? 1, 2, 3. Good. So I'm pushing her back into flexion and radial deviation. You guys see that? Okay. So it's the same thing. Back towards the direction she comes from. If she's coming into extension, ulnar deviation, I'm going to push her into flexion and radial deviation. And she's going to resist me at that. If your partner is very strong, you know, like if I tell her, now hold it, like full resistance, okay? Ready? I'm gonna test you. I can barely move her. Okay, so that's okay. It's just that's how much strength she has in that bone. I'm not gonna force that motion too much because you don't want to injure the wrist. but that was a good 5 out of 5, me pushing as much as I could without hurting her, and that's how I tested that strength, but didn't move, okay? So that's okay. I want you to be able to know what direction you're testing. If you come to practical and you pull the flexor carpi ulnaris, I want to see that you're trying to push, like stabilize at the forearm, but push back, and I want to see you pushing down, okay? So if you're doing the extensor, I want to see that you're going towards the opposite direction, okay? And it's pretty simple. You just practice it and get used to it. Yes.
These two aren't on this paper, but we are going to be tested on it.
This is
two
the new,
flexors.
the updated. The
Right, but these two aren't on.
Yeah.
this one?
Yeah.
Right. Okay, let me look at it because the ones that you're testing are the ones that we're going over in the lab. Okay, so if they're not on that
They're on
paper,
this one.
then I just need to update it. To go through any muscle groups you want to go through, you want to go through goniometer.